Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy.
Oh my God. You have problems. Well, that's Claire's way of saying Happy Thanksgiving.
Even though it's a chicken, I can't make a turkey noise.
Isn't it like just a gobble, gobble, gobble?
I don't have a turkey call, but let's see. That's the best I got.
It was pretty good, even though I've never actually heard a turkey.
That's kind of what they sound like. Do I need a pen?
I don't think so.
Well, that's worrisome if you can't figure it out.
Well, sometimes your brain hell concerns me. I wouldn't need a pen. I can almost tell you this case without reading my notes.
Well, there's no need to go that route. Where and when?
So, our where has a state flower of the goldenrod.
Washington State.
Another hint, their state motto is equality before the law.
Equality. Shoot.
Another hint,
Hold on.
the birthplace of Kool-Aid.
Iowa.
Another hint, this state's nickname was once the Tree Planter State, but that was changed in 1945 to the Cornhusker State.
Illinois?
Today we'll be in Nebraska.
I wasn't going to guess that at all.
Another fun fact, Nebraska's name comes from the Native American words flat water.
I've never met anybody from Nebraska. Do they allow them to leave?
Hey, I don't know. More specifically, we'll be in Omaha, Nebraska.
Where the steaks come from?
And our win is 1958. So our who is William Leslie Arnold. Spoiler.
He's a dude.
He grows up to be a murderer. William Leslie Arnold was born August 28th, 1942. He went by the nickname Les, so we will be calling him Les today. And his father was William Arnold also.
Are we going to call him Lee?
No, we're going to call William Bill.
You get it? Les Lee?
I get it.
Les Lee.
His dad name wasn't Leslie, though. His middle name, I think, was James.
You're a fun ruiner.
Not that it matters, but William Arnold, the dad, his father's name was Leslie James. So Leslie James, the grandpa, had his son, who he named William James Arnold. And then William had his son that he named after his pal and named him Leslie William. So they have like a whole family thing of like the son gets the first name of the grandfather's middle name, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, none of that matters. So we've got Les, who's the son.
And Lee.
His father's William Arnold, and we're going to call William Bill. Bill owned the Omaha region office of Watkins Products.
What do they make?
I don't know. I knew you were going to ask that. I didn't care, so I didn't look it up.
You mean you couldn't find it?
And I did not look. Anyway, Les, his mother, Opal, she was a stay-at-home mom. And Les also has a younger brother named James, who we're going to call Jimmy. And he was 3 years younger than Les. Now, realistically, Jimmy is not a major... You don't have to remember him. Sorry, Jimmy. The neighbors described Les as high-strung with a temper, but they also said he was very smart. He was part of the ROTC program in school, and he was on average like a B student. So he's pretty smart. Late in the afternoon on September 27th, 1958, this entitled teen with an attitude is now 16. And he told his mother, Opal, who at this point is 40, he's like, I'm taking the car tonight. I got me a hot date.
How old is he?
He's 16.
Nice to know what denial looks like. You're not going to tell me you're taking the car for a date.
Right. He had himself a hot date with his girlfriend at the drive-in movie.
It's about to be a walk-in movie.
Opal, realizing her son was confused as to which one of them was the parent, and was like, yeah, not tonight, bud. Oh, and by the way, this whole you tying up the phone line for hours with your little tart doesn't work for me.
She said.
They felt that Les's girlfriend was a bad influence, and they didn't like the way he behaved when he was around her.
Was she?
I don't know. I think he's a hormonal teen, and whether or not they had sex yet, or just the idea.
It wasn't the times for that.
Unless she was having sex with him, and that's why they didn't like her. You know what I mean? The parents are very judgy.
They're probably just making out.
Maybe. But either way, the parents are like, yeah, we don't like her. So Les, not appreciating being told no, lashed out at his mother.
What teen does like being told no?
The mother-son argument quickly became physical. Les, being a conniving little punk, took his younger brother Jimmy, who's 13, and didn't know anything about...
Did you say a 13?
I don't know. I don't think so. I thought I said who's 13.
You said took his younger brother who is a 13.
Well, anyway, he takes Jimmy over to the neighbor's house.
For his girlfriend?
No, just Les takes Jimmy and drops him off at the neighbor's house and tells the neighbor, hey, I need you to watch him. Which I'd be insulted because he's 13. And I feel like at 13, he's a man back in the 50s.
Well, really, it'd be closer to the 60s. I thought he was born in 42.
It's 58.
Well, closer to the 60s. Anyway, so how did it go from a physical fight to he's going to take his younger brother over to the neighbors?
So I think when they went their separate directions, like they got physical, I think it got to some pushing and shoving, or maybe she smacked him on the face, so he shoved her back. One of those type of situations. But either way, they went to their separate corners. She's upset. He's upset. He takes Jimmy and was like, you don't need to be here for this, and takes him over to the neighbor's house.
So I'm going to do some murderings.
Les then goes back to the family home where he shoots his mother, Opal, 6 times.
Didn't see that coming.
6 times he pulled the trigger, shooting 6 .22 caliber bullets into his mother's heart in the family dining room. The 16-year-old watched his mother's lifeless body crumpled on the dining room rug.
He does realize he's really not going to see his girlfriend now, right?
She comes and visits him in jail. Les checks the time, and he's like, shit, I gotta hurry. But I got time. He scurries about the house.
Make the movie?
He drags his mother's remains down to the basement and tidied up a bit, and then he just sat and waited.
Where's his dad?
When Bill, he's 42, came home from work that evening, the unsuspecting father of 2 was met with the same fate as his wife.
He didn't even do anything.
Les shot his father 6 times in the upper torso around his heart. Les then dragged the body of his father down to the basement to be tossed to the side next to his deceased wife. Les then took the car to go take his girlfriend to that drive-in movie. Eventually, the following day, Les went to the neighbors and asked to borrow a shovel.
Yeah, and here's your little brother back.
Yeah, and the teen supposedly wanted to do some gardening for his parents, who, by the way,
are dead.
He said had to suddenly go out of town. But in reality, Les decided on digging a trench and burying the bodies of his parents in the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And Les dug a hole that was 6 feet long and 3 feet deep, which sounds like it's a pretty big hole to dig. Because once you hit that 3 feet mark, I feel like it gets kind of difficult, right?
I don't know, Andrea. I haven't dug many graves.
I was talking more about digging a hole for planting trees and stuff.
Sure.
After you get a certain depth.
We use an auger.
It sounds like it'd be a pretty decent sized hole, but in reality, once you dump 2 bodies into it, it's a very shallow grave.
It was shallow at 3 feet.
Especially for 2 bodies. But Les also rolled up the 8x10 area rug in the dining room that was covered in his parents' blood, as well as 2 smaller throw rugs that also had blood on them. So now he's buried the parents in the backyard. He grabs the 3 rugs, drags those to the Papio Creek, and tosses them into the water. Now, after his parents have been murdered and covering his tracks, Les contacted his paternal grandparents, and they came and stayed at the house with Les and Jimmy until Bill and Opal were supposed to return from their rush trip.
Mm-hmm.
The boys are still going to school, and they're telling others that his parents had merely just gone on a sudden trip. The grandparents and neighbors end up doing some chatting, and they're like, this seems really weird because it's going on 2 weeks, and there's no sign of Bill and Opal. And it was already...
And they weren't the ones to arrange all the people watching their children. They just skedaddled and said, figure it out.
Right. And that was what was also strange, was that these parents, who are pretty responsible adults, have a business, they exude responsibility in their lives, just up and disappear without any sort of heads up or arrangements for their kids. And what kind of emergency for a sudden trip doesn't involve family, work, friends?
Or their clothes?
Right. And so the grandparents contact the police. One of the things that seemed odd also is both Bill and Opal's vehicles were still at the house. Also, no one at work or in the family or even the neighbors knew of the couple going out of town. Police realized after speaking with all these different people, the one person's name that kept being brought up
Is Les.
is 16-year-old Les. So police decide Les must know something. Like, he's got to be able to help us track down his parents. So they find Les, and he's at his father's place of work trying to run the Watkins product company.
Oh.
Yeah. And they bring Les into the police station, and Les just spills his guts. I guess it was like weighing on his conscience what he had done, and he just told the police.
Well, he's been living lie after lie after lie. Everybody's been asking questions.
Right, and he just can't keep up.
Mm-hmm.
So he spills his guts, tells the police everything, and then he leads the police to his parents' bodies in the backyard on October 11th, 1958. Les is officially arrested for the murder of his parents. Les openly wept in court.
Fuck off.
And appeared remorseful for his actions.
You little spoiled
when he appeared in front of the judge.
He's gonna cry a lot more when he takes a lot of dicks to his face because he's just a baby.
About 2.5 months before Les's 17th birthday, on June 2nd, 1959, he pled guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison.
Second degree? He had time to take his little brother to the house. Second degree, my eye.
He was sentenced to life in prison in 1959, but he'd have the option of parole after 7 to 10 years because they felt that he was still a baby. There was hope.
His trigger finger worked good enough.
Les would be described as a model prisoner and be given trustee status, and Les becomes pals with other trustee inmates, one in particular named James Edward Harding. James was 22 when he was arrested and put in prison. He had been convicted of shooting a 32-year-old bus driver named Richard Whitehall during a bar holdup on February 19th, 1959. After James shot Richard with a .22, he proceeded to finish his robbery of the bar. He was also sentenced to life in prison. Now, these two have become buddies. They've got trustee status, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as we've learned in other cases, trustee status means they get extra privileges in the jail.
They can watch the TVs.
Well, no, they do extra chores, but that gives them more free reign. So like when everybody else is on lockdown in their cells, they're allowed to roam free because they're either cooking or cleaning or doing something productive. They can be trusted is essentially what trustee status was. They can be trusted. They're trustees.
Imagine that.
Mm-hmm. But life seemed like a real long time to these menfolk. So on July 14th, 1967,
they escaped.
Traitor. You done cheated. But yes, Les, who's now 24, about to be 25, and James, at this point, is 32, they cut through the bars of a prison music room.
With a nail file.
And the pair managed to climb a 12-foot fence that was topped with barbed wire, and they successfully escaped. Months would go by with no sign of Les or James.
That's because he's decided to let his hair grow out, and now he goes by Leslie.
Finally, 9 months later, James Harding is captured in California.
Did his girlfriend help?
No. James is captured, but Les still couldn't be located. James told police that he and Les had gone to Chicago together and then went their separate ways from there.
Makes sense, because they'd be looking for a couple of dudes.
Well, and I think they also had different goals. I'll tell you more about James at the end for one of my fun facts. But the main goal at this point is, where the hell's Les? It's believed that Les possibly could be dead as a John Doe because there's no sign of him at all. He hasn't reached out to any of his family, his friends, his girlfriend.
Well, I can't imagine his family wanted to see him anyway.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't reach out to anybody, so they're completely baffled. Where is this dude?
Mm-hmm. How long was he in jail? He said 2 years?
About 10 years?
Then he was about to get out.
No, he didn't get parole.
Yeah, but then nobody gets it the first go round.
Because this is such an old case, I did read multiple conflicting articles that did say he was originally life in prison, which we know is typically 25 years, and then at some point they offered to commute his sentence to be up for parole. So I don't know at which point his sentence was commuted.
Yeah, not if you're escaping.
Right, but if he was already 5 to 10 years into it, and then they commuted his sentence, and then he'd have another 7 to 10 years before he'd be up for parole. It's just the option of parole would be there at some point. It just wasn't coming fast enough for Les, so he's decided it's time to go. But while the police and everybody are looking for Les, months have gone by. James has been captured. Les is actually off living his best life. Les began living under the alias John Damon. On November 25th, 1967, Les marries Janine Bouvier. Janine was a divorced mother of 4. 2 years later, the family of 6 moved to Cincinnati, Ohio in 1969. 2 years after that, he moved the family again, but to Miami, Florida. After nearly 10 years of marriage, Les files for a divorce on July 27th, 1977, because Janine was not having any more of this moving around. She wanted to raise her girls in one place, and he keeps moving them all over the country. So when he's like, I want to move, she says no. He's like, fine, I'm leaving without you. Files for divorce.
Nice to see you.
Les wanted to move to Costa Rica because it was cheaper cost of living, or he wanted to go to Hawaii.
Those are two ends of the spectrum. Hawaii's not cheaper.
Right. I think he just wanted to get the hell away from the States where they're looking for him.
I would think after so long, they're not actively, like, people aren't looking for him, but he probably is going to be looking a little different.
He does have a mole on his cheek, on his face, that is very distinctive.
Yeah, but if he's in a different state, nobody's going to be aware of that feller, let alone that feller being gone.
Yeah.
So,
because he's now filed for divorce, at some point between his divorce being finalized in February of 1977 and 1983, it's unknown what all he was really doing during that time period. But Les not only moved to California, but he also met himself another woman. And Janine was not happy with Les. She found out about his new woman, and she mailed him his saxophone.
I thought they filed for divorce.
Right, but I was just going to skim over it. But Les was kind of a piece of shit and had a bit of a...
You think? He started out that way when he shot his parents.
Well, he kind of had an abusive relationship with the girls. Like, he wasn't physically abusive, but he would tell them they weren't good enough or they could always do better. He was very hard on them. But again, I feel like, you know, he's on the run. So I feel like there was a certain level of stress always on the back of his mind. He's probably a very paranoid individual.
That's no excuse. He's an asshole.
It's not. Absolutely. I don't think it's an excuse, is what I'm saying. They, like the articles and stuff I was reading, it says it uses as an excuse for his bad behavior.
He was real stressed.
I think he's just a piece of shit. But because his wife of 10 years refused to move, he filed for a divorce. Mind you, she's put up with all his bullshit for the last 10 years, and now he's just going to divorce her and move on with some other girl, who, by the way, is much younger than him. So he had left his saxophone, his prized possession.
Well, he was used to blowing other objects, so he needed something on the outside.
It's disgusting. Janine, she mails him his saxophone to his California address, but first she smashed the hell out of it.
Backed over it with the car.
Pretty much. Janine said that Les, or John, whatever you want to call him, was a great provider, but a lousy husband.
What?
So he worked really hard to provide for the family, but he was just a shitty husband. And then Les, he kept in contact with all 4 of his stepdaughters, even after he divorced their mother. He might have been hard on them, but he at least made the effort to stay in their lives because he did raise them for 10 years.
Well, you don't know. He could have been grooming them.
He's not.
You don't know?
I do know.
You don't know.
So, I do know. In 1983, Les is now 41 when he marries that other woman whose identity remains protected. She was a foreign exchange student who was living in Los Angeles when they met. 3 years after the couple married, they have their first child together, a daughter, and then 5 years later, they have a son together. The family moved around California quite a bit. They never really settled down anywhere, so after about a year or 2, he would pick up the family and move someplace else. Les's case, in the meantime, was being investigated by the FBI well into the 90s. They followed leads all around the country and even internationally, but there were no signs of Les. But with the evolution of technology in the 90s, because you figure that's when we started getting the internet, you've got America's Most Wanted's going on. The bump in technology was amazing in the 90s. It's believed that Les was worried about being found out. Also, suspicious behavior of Les's that distinctive mole on his face, he went and had it removed in 1992. And then when he's 50, he packs up his family and he tells them, we're going to move. But first, he goes back to Miami to have dinner with his stepdaughters. And he tells them he's finally leaving the country, does his goodbyes. He never contacts them again. Like, he's got to get the hell out of Dodge. Time to go. At first, Les's wife didn't want to move out of the country, but eventually she caved. And I personally wonder if it's because she knows that he divorced his last wife because she refused to move.
You either move or we're divorced.
Right. So she moves. And Les and his new family moved to New Zealand in 1992.
If she was a foreign exchange student, why didn't they just go back wherever she was?
I have no idea. I think he just wanted to be
anywhere else,
as kind of tucked away as possible, because he goes to New Zealand in 1992 after that last visit with his stepdaughters. They went from Miami to New Zealand. And then 5 years after they moved to New Zealand, Les picked up his family and they moved to Australia.
That's not really that far of a move.
No, but it's just, he likes his islands. So when he met with his stepdaughters for the final time, his one stepdaughter, she gave him some advice. You have your own family now. Do better. Don't be so hard on your kids. Tell them you love them. Have a great life. I guess it sank in for him because he was a doting father to his son and his daughter. He regularly told his daughter and son about how their births changed him for the better. Les absolutely loved his family. He told his wife and children, when they asked him about his childhood, that his life as a child was very hard because he was orphaned at a young age. He would say he grew up in a Chicago orphanage. And if his wife or kids would press for more information, Les would just simply say that his life had been so difficult and it was just too hard to revisit those memories, nor did he have a desire to learn about his birth parents. His sad story made some sort of sense to anybody he told the lies to, so they just let it go.
All right.
Les also mastered telling what our mother referred to as the DC truth. So the DC truth, for those that don't know, it's, when it's a lie, but there's a little bit of truth dabbled in there. So Les would tell people that he once worked as a dental technician, which he did. He just simply left out the part that it was when he worked as a trustee in the Nebraska penitentiary. By the late 90s, Les is in his mid-50s, and he suffers a massive heart attack from a blood clot. From that point on, Les struggled with blood clots. By the time he's 60, mind you, he's been on the go for his whole life. He's 60. By the time he's 60, he's diagnosed with deep vein thrombosis, which, for those that don't know, deep vein thrombosis is when you have clots that form in your veins, usually in your lower regions, such as your pelvis, thighs, or calves. And you're at risk of strokes or heart attack if one of those clots becomes large enough to travel through your vein to your heart or your brain or whatever. And Les would suffer a complication from his blood clot and eventually would pass away just shy of his 68th birthday on August 6, 2010. All his secrets died with him. His son was 19 and his daughter was 25 when he passed away. Meanwhile, after letting the escapee evade capture for several decades, the FBI, not knowing that he had died, turned the case over to the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services. But the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services was like, psh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, nope. We're going to be real worried about this one. He's been missing for how many years? 40?
Yeah. And they were like, nope, not it. And they turned the cold case over to the U.S. Marshals in 2020.
Yeah, like, good luck knocking on senior citizen homes.
Right? It was like the world's slowest game of hot potato with this case.
That's because realistically, how many, violent 60, 70-year-olds are there?
At this point, he'd be in his 80s.
Well, still, that, you better hurry up and get this one arrested.
Well, and the thing is, I realize he murdered his parents, but if he hasn't been getting in trouble with the law...
But they don't know that.
Yeah. Well, knowing that his father was an orphan, Les's son was curious about his father's past. So he decided he wanted to learn more about him.
But can't find anything?
Yeah, and at the age of 27, he flew from Australia to Chicago in 2018. His son was perplexed to learn from the Department of Vital Records that his loving father's birth certificate was falsified. He was also unable to find the orphanage his father claimed to grow up in. Unable to find any answers and literally just ending up with more questions, frustrated, he returns home back to Australia. A few more years would go by with all of these unanswered questions just gnawing away at the back of his mind. And on theme with our cases lately, in 2022, Les's son decided to take a DNA test from Ancestry.com and posted the results, hoping to get into contact with some long-lost family that could shed some light about his dad's past. And he was thrilled when the DNA pinged as to discovering a close DNA match. One day, shortly after, it wasn't a relative from his father's side who contacted him, but a U.S. Marshal. Right? The deputy from the Omaha Marshal's office flew to Australia to collect DNA samples to confirm that John Damon was, in fact, William Leslie Arnold. That Marshal had the daunting task of explaining everything to his family, who were none the wiser. They were absolutely speechless to hear that the loving husband and doting father, John Damon, was the convicted murderer and escapee, William Leslie Arnold.
And then suddenly made sense, all the moving.
Mm-hmm. Les's biological children developed a relationship with Les's stepdaughters. They lovingly refer to themselves now as our new dysfunctional family. And Les's son did say he doesn't regret the DNA test, but they definitely don't put a warning label on these tests saying that you might not like what you find.
Actually, I think they do now. Like, that before you order them, it's just like, just so we're clear that, before you start digging up the past, there's no telling, like, when people find out that they aren't actually related to their parents, like the adoption things that they never knew, all the things can come out. So be ready for all scenarios. We're not responsible for the upheaval of your life.
Right. But Les's son said that he is grateful for the human connections that he's made, as well as finally learning the truth about his father's past. Now, I got some random facts for you. Random fun fact number 1. Les's favorite movie was the 1979 Clint Eastwood flick, Escape from Alcatraz.
He studied it.
Well, he'd already escaped by then. So for those that can't tell from the title, it's a prison break movie where the prisoners escape.
I thought you were going to say where they escape from Alcatraz.
Yeah. But it's just interesting that that was his favorite movie, because him and James, when they escaped, they did make dummies of themselves in their beds to make it look like they were still in their beds. Fun fact number 2, or scary fact number 1, Les was the last inmate to successfully escape from the Nebraska State Penitentiary. Hundreds of men attempted to escape from the penitentiary since it was first established in 1869. The prison had housed roughly more than 13 inmates at a time, with a mere 465 average of staff members. And from 1970 to 1977, so in that 7-year period, nearly 200 men attempted to escape from the prison or its work release program, and nearly all of them were apprehended still on the property, but only 11 remained at large, Les being the last man to escape. 11? That's scary to know that 11 prisoners were out there just doing whatever.
No. What was that one statistic that I gave you where there were like thousands unaccounted for that just never checked in when they were released?
Oh, yeah.
And they just never knew where they were. And if they found them, they'd be going back to jail for that violation. But like thousands.
Yeah, but those are people that they let out because they thought they could sync their lives back up as being normal. These are fellers that are in there for life.
No, how many times have they let people out and they just repeat some shit? So don't act like these are the good ones. They're gonna do no wrong.
No, I didn't say these were the good ones.
I'm just saying is all. We know that there's a problem with all this catch and release.
Yeah. Again, I did not deep dive into James Harding because I didn't care. This case wasn't about him.
Yeah.
But when I looked him up because I was curious what he went to prison for, I wanted to know, who is Les escaping with? Is it another murderer? Is it somebody?
Sheep worrying?
So anyway, so I looked him up and I did find several articles about James Harding, and his name is James Edward Harding. And he was released from his life sentence when he was 41, even though he escaped. he was granted parole in good old
That's
1976.
because they needed to get rid of the paperwork.
Like I said, I didn't do a deep dive into his life, but one of the other articles that popped up, I'm pretty sure it's the same feller because this feller's name was also James Edward Harding. He was arrested in Alabama for post office burglary,
Like,
and he escaped the Alabama prison in 1987, but he was fairly quickly apprehended.
they didn't have locks at that time.
It was just crazy to me that if this feller, he's like the jailhouse version of Houdini, that he just keeps escaping from the prisons.
Have you seen any of the old-timey locks? You can practically put your finger in them.
We have different hobbies. But that is my case on William Leslie Arnold. I did find it pleasantly surprising that he at least didn't go around committing more murders. He's actually one of the few that
Behaved.
got out of jail. And by say get out of jail, he did run away. He was not released, but he didn't go on to.
He didn't stay anywhere long enough to plan a crime.
But you know what I'm saying? Like, at least he didn't murder his wife and children because they wouldn't move with him. He just filed for a divorce.
He nearly did.
And I couldn't find what happened to his brother, Jimmy.
What do you mean? The one that found the family?
He didn't find the family.
Oh,
but
the little brother. The
Yeah.
little brother.
yeah,
I would imagine the grandparents raised him.
probably. And I would assume that he grew up to have a.
They all moved because who wants to live around that?
Yeah. Les had a tough time as a teenager in prison because he was real sad because they kept him away from the adults. So he had nobody.
That's because he would have been fresh meat.
Well, he had nobody to talk to. So he really enjoyed.
He should be grateful for that, or he would have been raped on the regular.
Yeah. But he was real sad. So, like, when reporters would come to interview him, he would just ask them if they'd stay and just hang out for a little bit because he enjoyed the human interaction. And his girlfriend, she would come visit him a few times before she realized she ain't getting none from him. And then she left him high and dry.
That's because she had to continue on her professional career as a prostitute.
I just thought it was crazy because I can tell you, if my daughters had a boyfriend who murdered his family, I would not be taking them to go.
Why would you even put that out there?
I would not take them to go visit the boyfriend in jail.
Let's face it, she didn't say her and her parents visited him. My guess would be they did not know she was visiting him.
So
she was probably supposed to be doing something else.
You have to be with an adult to visit somebody in the prison.
I figured it out. The time frame it was, she was practically an adult.
Anyway, what did you figure out?
And anyway, that whole town was terrified. And you said it was like, oh no, never mind. Well, anyway, so shut up, Andrew. You're breaking my thoughts.
They seem to be broken all on their own.
That she went to visit him, but everybody in that town was terrified to refuse their teenagers the use of the car. So they're like, go ahead. Here you go. I'll write you a note. You can go. And then they whispered, get rid of the guns.
I just thought it was crazy that he was on the loose for so long.
Yeah, but like...
You can't get away with that shit now.
I don't know, because they've had people who've been loose for a little while and they catch them after a few years because... Really, living that life of you feel like somebody's always looking over your shoulder. They're such paranoid people that really, if you just stayed where you're at, batten down, create your life, it's a whole less suspicious than somebody who is always on the move.
That's true. But I still feel like with DNA, because you figure in the 50s when he originally committed his crime, they didn't have the DNA evidence to connect him to shit. And... like you pointed out, he had him a baby face still. So as he aged, facial hair for the menfolk and some women, but it hides the appearance. So
you have problems.
No, I don't.
Can I suggest a wax treatment?
Fuck you. But that's all I got. All right. Well, happy Thanksgiving. Don't burn down the house, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Enjoy your time with your family. Just breathe through it. Maybe spike your drink a little.
Take the whole Xanax. Don't murder anybody.
Yeah, that too.
Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the channel.